Lila quickly covered Madame Rose's mouth as the bedroom door started to open. "Don't talk," she whispered, her heart racing. A man's voice slipped through the crack of the door. It was Mr. Henry, Madame Rose's husband. He sounded calm and cold, talking on the phone as if he were ordering lunch. "She's 48. No child. Her parents are gone. Everything will be mine. We finish it quietly tonight." Lila's heart raced. Madame Rose's hand shook as she gripped Lila's wrist. They stood frozen, afraid to breathe. Madame Rose wore her blue nightgown, and her glasses hung low on her nose. Lila stood in her maid dress, holding towels that felt heavier than stone. The doorknob turned. Lila froze. Mr. Henry laughed and said, "Don't worry. I'll make it look like she was sick." His voice faded away as he walked off. Silence filled the hallway. Madame Rose looked at Lila with wide eyes. "Ma," Lila whispered, her voice trembling but firm, "please listen to me first." That was the moment everything changed. That morning, the white mansion in Lagos looked peaceful. The sun shone brightly, birds sang in the garden, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Lila had been awake since 5 o'clock. She swept the floors, polished the glass tables, and cleaned every corner until it sparkled. She took pride in making the house shine. Madame Rose was kind but busy. She owned a large fabric company that made clothes everyone desired. She wore lace dresses and light perfumes. She often smiled and said, "Lila, you have magic hands. You make this house beautiful." Lila returned a shy smile. "Thank you, Ma. This is a Menard, decent price of this land." But one person in the house made her uneasy, Mr. Henry. He was tall and always carried himself with pride. He didn't work but enjoyed bossing everyone around. He left his shoes everywhere and rarely showed gratitude. Still, Lila stayed quiet. She worked hard and remained gentle. She had no idea that by nightfall she would need all her courage to save a life. Mr. Henry was handsome but cruel. He smiled in public, but his eyes remained cold. He liked to drink and tell unfunny jokes. When Madame Rose had meetings, he would grumble. "What's the point of money if you're always busy?" he once said, rolling his eyes. Sometimes, Lila saw Madame Rose stop and stare at a small empty baby cradle in the hallway. It reminded her that Madame Rose and Mr. Henry had no children. Lila felt sorrow for her boss. Madame Rose craved love, while her husband only wanted her money. That afternoon, the sky turned gray. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Lila went upstairs to change Madame's bedsheets. As she approached the door, she heard Mr. Henry's voice inside. "Tonight," he whispered on the phone, "we'll make it look natural. The doctor said she's stressed. No one will question it." Lila froze. Her hands trembled, but she didn't drop the towels. Her heart raced. She had to act fast. Otherwise, Madame Rose would die tonight. Lila turned and almost collided with Madame Rose, who was walking toward her with papers in hand. "Ma, please stop," Lila whispered. She dropped the towels and covered Madame's mouth. "Don't talk, please." Madame Rose's eyes widened in surprise, but she saw the fear on Lila's face and stayed quiet. Behind the door, Mr. Henry continued, "Yes, 1 pill and rest. She won't wake up again. I want freedom. I want a new wife." Tears filled Madame Rose's eyes. She finally understood. Her husband planned to kill her. Lila mouthed the words, "Call the police." Madame Rose nodded slowly. They quietly moved into the study. Her hands shook as she dialed the police. "Please come quickly," she whispered. "My husband wants to harm me." Outside, thunder roared. Rain began to fall heavily. Then, footsteps. Mr. Henry was coming down the hall. He reached for the study door. Just then, sirens wailed outside. Lila stood firm and whispered, "Ma, stand behind me." The front door burst open. Police officers rushed inside, their boots echoing on the marble floor. Mr. Henry stepped into the study and froze. His smile disappeared when he saw them. "What is this?" he shouted. Margaret, tell them to leave. Madame Rose spoke calmly but firmly. You planned to kill me. I heard every word. Mr. Henry laughed nervously. It was a joke. A police officer stepped forward. Sir, you are under arrest for planning a murder. No! Mr. Henry yelled as two officers handcuffed him. You'll regret this, he shouted at Lila. But Lila looked at him and said, This is your doing, not mine. They led him away as rain poured outside. Madame Rose sat down, trembling. Lila, she whispered, you saved my life. Lila knelt beside her. I only did what was right, Ma. That night, the mansion was quiet. The storm had washed away fear and replaced it with truth. The next morning, news spread across Lagos. Billionaire's husband arrested in murder plot. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse. Inside, Madame Rose sat beside Lila not as a maid, but as family. When the judge announced that Mr. Henry was guilty, people gasped. Madame Rose cried softly, holding Lila's hand. Days later, at a press meeting, Madame Rose surprised everyone. She said, Lila is no longer my maid. She is my daughter. People couldn't believe it. Reporters took photos. Lila stood beside Madame Rose in a golden dress. Her eyes filled with tears. She had gone from cleaning floors to being loved like a daughter. Madame Rose smiled and whispered, You are family now. Always hold your head high. Lila nodded. Her new life had just begun. Madame Rose sent Lila to school. Lila worked hard, even when people whispered about her past. Some classmates teased her, saying she was just lucky. But Lila refused to let it stop her. She studied late into the night, reading books until her eyes hurt. She wanted to make Madame Rose proud. 4 years passed. Lila graduated at the top of her class. On graduation day, she wore her cap and gown, smiling as she walked across the stage. Madame Rose sat in the front row, clapping with tears in her eyes. That's my daughter, she whispered proudly. Lila felt joy swell in her heart. She had once been a maid, now she was a scholar, ready to start a new chapter. When Lila started working at Madame Rose's company, she met a young man named Daniel. He was kind, gentle, and admired her strong work ethic. They became friends first, then fell in love. He treated her with respect, and laughter filled their days. One evening, under the golden lights of Lagos, Daniel knelt down and asked, Lila, will you marry me? Tears came to her eyes. Yes, she whispered. Their wedding was beautiful. Madame Rose cried with joy as she watched her daughter walk down the aisle in a white gown. That night, Lila looked around the hall filled with lights and thought, dreams do come true. 2 years later, Madame Rose told Lila something surprising. I want to visit Henry in prison. Why, Ma? Lila asked. Madame Rose smiled gently. Because I'm tired of anger. Forgiveness sets us free. At the prison, Henry looked weak and older. When he saw Madame Rose, he cried. I don't deserve to see you, he said. I forgive you, she replied softly. But our marriage ends today. Start over. Be better. She gave him some money to begin a new life. Henry wept, holding the papers. As Madame Rose and Lila walked out, the sun shone through the bars. Lila held her hand and whispered, You are the strongest woman I know. 2 years later, Lila held her newborn baby girl in her arms. She named her Hope Grace. When Madame Rose carried the baby, tears of joy filled her eyes. This is the family I always wished for, she said. Lila hugged her. You gave me everything, Ma, a home, love, and courage. The mansion that once felt cold was now filled with laughter, baby cries, and peace. Lila looked around and whispered softly, Is greater than careful hands may save a home, but kind hearts make it whole again. From that day forward, everyone who entered the house felt love instead of fear, all because one brave maid chose to listen behind a door.